many failed Star Wars games can you recall in recent years? Personally, I remember the unsuccessful launch of the Battlefront 2 remake, its eventual revival, and the lukewarm reception of Jedi Survivor due primarily to poor optimization. There's also Star Wars Squadron, whose purpose I never quite understood. Years ago, several problematic games were released, but it was only recently that we witnessed a real debacle, far worse than the 9th episode. This debacle was the re-release of the classic 2005 Battlefront games. As a huge fan of the universe and these games in particular, I eagerly anticipated the reissue and even made plans around it. I envisioned creating a video on the history of Battlefront, streaming the game, and reliving the legendary title that I adorned in my youth. However, all my plans were dashed within half an hour of playing this so-called reissue. It was simply appalling. At the time of recording this video, the game has received 99% negative reviews from regular users on Steam and has an extremely negative rating. This is a real embarrassment, unmatched in the Star Wars gaming industry. So what went wrong? Why did the re-release of the classic Battlefront parts fail so miserably? Sometimes developers fail to fulfill their promises or engage in misleading advertising, setting expectations they can't meet. For example, they promise one thing, but in fact it turns out quite another. Or the players themselves build high expectations and then get upset that they were not met. One could attribute the failure of Battlefront to this. However, none of these reasons fits our case. The developers did not promise any remasters or remakes, did not promise new graphics, did not promise anything global, and all fans of the game understood this perfectly well. The re-release of Battlefront was positioned as the same classic game in the same classic shell, with several new maps and most importantly, with a full-fledged online mode for up to 64 people. In addition, the classic Battlefront has appeared on consoles. Do you understand? No false advertising and no high expectations, so during the advertising campaign, the trailers of the reissue gained quite a lot of views and were accompanied by a large number of likes and positive comments. The players understood that nothing would change globally, and they really wanted to just play that very childhood game with a normal online mode. That's all. The price of the game was almost $35, and this is a lot for a 2005 game. But devoted Star Wars fans, including me, were ready to make such sacrifices for the sake of nostalgia. And by the way, the development of the reissue was handled by Asper Studio, which is known for its successful ports of the Knights of the Old Republic on mobile phones, the port of Republic Commando and Jedi Outcast on the console, as well as the creation of the cult game The Force Unleashed. They were supposed to be developing a remake of KOTOR, but they were quickly suspended from work. So what did go wrong with Battlefront anyway? Everything went wrong. The reissue just came out completely broken, and even those things that worked fine in 2005 worked crookedly or don't work at all in the reissue. To begin with, only 3 official servers were allocated for owners of the PC version of the game, and they work so bad. My half hour of playing was accompanied by several crashes, bugs, causeless loss of sound, incomprehensible control curves that cannot be reconfigured, and sometimes I was simply not allowed to start the game even when I had already logged onto the server. The game started, I chose a character, waited until the countdown was over, and nothing. They just wouldn't let me in. Also, for some reason, the game did not allow me to choose the faction for which I want to play, which is why I always had to click on auto selection. What amused me the most was that sometimes the game could end with a victory or defeat by my or the enemy's team before the end. That is, the game has just started, the score is equal for the teams, all the players are in place, no one came out, and suddenly, defeat. That's great. Moreover, in addition to those 3 official servers, there were others, only the players themselves created them. Sometimes with not the best internet, and if the host disconnected from the server, the game crashed. The last time I saw such a system was 15 years ago, but those were pirated games, and this is the official reissue in 2024 for $35. Tired of enduring this whole circus, I quit the game and decided to read the reviews, and what was my surprise when out of 500 comments in Steam, I found only 5 positive ones. I'm just in shock. Why did my classic Battlefront from the pirate anthology of Star Wars games for $1 work better than this reissue 20 years later? How could you screw up when nothing new needed to be done? The developers themselves did not promise any big new products and people liked it. It was just necessary to take the old game, make a normal player selection mode for it, as in the new Battlefront 2017, and that's it. Let the fans be nostalgic. I don't know, it just doesn't fit in my head. I would still understand if they really tried to make a remaster and something went wrong, but Asper just stuffed it up out of the blue. And how did the quality control department of Lucasfilm Games miss an outright raw product? After all, they had a pretty good advertising campaign, which means they had some hopes for the project. It's also funny that this very reissue is as much as 65 gigabytes without a single new texture, while the classic 2005 Battlefront was only 10. My heart is really broken. It seemed to me that the reissue would give me those unforgettable youthful emotions again, but it became only a stab in my heart. As a result, millions of disappointed fans, the lowest rating in the history of Star Wars games, massive refunds, falling shares of Asper, and huge reputational losses of Lucasfilm Games. God, I'm in complete shock. You just know, I am still completely at a loss of how such a thing could happen. The re-release of Battlefront looked like a good way to bring the oldies back to their favorite game and at the same time earn decent money because these same oldies willingly carried them at the pre-order stage. Minimum effort, no investment and maximum return, but they just stuffed it up. You really know how to shoot at a target at point-blank range and miss. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. 2 weeks earlier, a remaster of another legendary Star Wars Dark Forces game was released, and it turned out good and has very positive ratings on Steam. Why is everything great there, but it's terrible here? It just makes you think. I do not advise anyone to buy this so-called reissue. Once again, I am convinced that sometimes it is better not to touch the classics than to revive them like this. Perhaps over time, everything will get better and Asper will be able to restore the balance of power by fixing all the problems of the game, and it seems like they are already slowly doing this by adding new servers, but whether working on bugs will positively affect the future fate of the game will become known much later. The most important time for any project is the first couple of days after the release, and if they fail, then as a rule, their attitude towards the project will not change dramatically further. Perhaps some players will return, but in history, the reissue of Battlefront will forever remain as a hack for $35. If you have already played, write your emotions in the comments. Anyway, write down if you played Battlefront in the noughties and what you feel about this legendary game. Since the epical return did not take place, let's at least remember the game with a kind word. Thank you so much for watching, goodbye, and I'll see you soon.